I think a lot of people will think, what is the future of the World Cup if it's going to have these private investors putting pressure on? They want it to be, they want it to earn more and more money. How do you do that? You do it by expanding the World Cup. You do it by having it more often. You do it by holding it in places like the USA more often.
Now then, let's go to that breaking exclusive story from The Times. FIFA President Gianni Infantino is planning to sell stakes in the World Cup to private investors under a scheme he's been discussing with figures close to Donald Trump. The scheme could maybe make him tens of millions of pounds. The author of this exclusive is Martyn Ziegler, the chief sports reporter at The Times. Hello to you, Martyn.
Good afternoon, John.
Martyn, you can probably guess my reaction to this. My reaction as a journalist when I saw this story was, what an extraordinary story. And as a football fan, it is, what the hell is Gianni Infantino thinking other than ka-ching?
Oh, I'm afraid ka-ching sums it up. Yes. I mean, I think we know that actually his driving force is making money and securing power for FIFA. And he wants a bigger share of football for whatever reasons. He wants his new club tournament to be dominant. He wants the World Cup to bring in more and more money and cement his position. And and now he's going to sell off a stake in the World Cup, or he wants to anyway, to private investors led by Joshua Kushner, who is the brother of Donald Trump's son-in-law.
I'm just now, Martyn, trying to, I don't know, to guess, estimate the reaction as this story spreads. We saw, for example, I start as a skeptic. Partly that's what I do, and partly because on this occasion it's very much what I am. When I look at what happened in the World Cup, simply because it was being hosted in the United States, Donald Trump giving away the trophy, being given a medal, the commercial breaks, the money-making aspects, that was because it was being hosted in America. What on earth would it look like if those around Donald Trump had a stake in the thing? I don't know, it defies imagination.
Well, I know. I mean, that's why we've had reaction from UEFA now saying they're very alarmed by this, and I think a lot of people will think, what is the future of the World Cup if it's going to have these private investors putting pressure on? They want it to earn more and more money. How do you do that? You do it by expanding the World Cup. You do it by having it more often. You do it by holding it in places like the USA more often, because that is the biggest market.
Yeah, by a strange coincidence.
Yeah, exactly, by a strange coincidence. So no wonder people are, and it's not just the Europeans, by the way. A lot of people in football in North America are also reacting similarly. So, and obviously they're very close to it. So I think people think this is perhaps a defining moment for the World Cup and the game.
It does, doesn't it seem exactly that way? You say that UEFA, the European football bodies, have said they're alarmed by this. Was that their word, alarmed? Because you would need buy-in, you'd need some sort of approval from the various world federations. UEFA is a big one, and there are others. How do you think it's going to go down?
Yeah, I think. The trouble is, you've got UEFA, who the people who run it are very alarmed by it. But then part of this plan is that you would have each of the 211 associations who make up FIFA, they would be given a stake, say worth $20 million in it, and they would be able to sell their share and earn $20 million. So, say if you're from a tiny Caribbean or Pacific country, $20 million is probably 5 times what your annual revenue is, and the chance to earn this, are you going to turn this down, or are you going to vote for it? Because when it comes to the vote, it's the 211 associations are going to vote whether this is a good idea or not. And money often talks. So I think this is, as I said, a pivotal moment.
Martyn, do you think this is going to fly?
I think there's going to be a huge amount of opposition to it. And I think it's going to be difficult. But I think it's possible it might happen. But I think it's going to be the mother of all battles to try and stop it happening as well.
I'm now wondering, and I'm speculating. I mean, there's tension in world football among the governing bodies as it is. We know that. UEFA were very upset with various aspects of the way the World Cup was played out in the United States and of course Mexico and Canada. I don't think it's over-dramatising things to say we might be looking at least a discussion about the possibility of a fundamental schism between these bodies. Isn't that possible?
Well, it's only been building up, hasn't it? It started off with something fairly, on the face of it, fairly trivial, but around the red card and the ban being overturned for the USA striker, Falarin Balogun. I think that because that sort of went to the heart of interfering with what happens on the pitch, that created an uproar. This is altogether more serious, I think, and if you have a World Cup which is being dictated effectively by private investors. I mean, that is such a removal from what the World Cup is supposed to be about. Then, not surprisingly, people are kind of up in arms.
No, that is quite an understatement. My word, what a story. And just in the last few moments, Europe's governing body, UEFA, released a statement saying that the plan, I'm quoting now, crosses a line that football's governing institutions should never cross, adding that none of us are the owners of football and the World Cup is not FIFA's to sell. We're joined by Mark Palios, the former FA chief executive and also a former player. Mark, hello to you.
Hi, John.
Well, first of all, Mark, what are your thoughts?
Pretty much the same as everybody you've spoken to who I think is a football person. To my mind, this is just another step in the globalization and monetization of elite sport. It's been going on around different sports, etc. But I think this is unconscionable because we get into a position where you have differently motivated key stakeholders. They'll want their return, and cash will leave the game, but they'll do more than that. I think they will pull the game away from its essential roots. Players will have central contracts. You already see with the IPL, sometimes it's better for them to play in the IPL than to play for England. You saw that with rugby players playing in France rather than going for the money rather than playing for England. And then fans, the consideration of fans, you saw an element of that in this commercialized World Cup that we've just had, but they will definitely become customers, and that's one of the things you try to avoid. And finally, the game's rooted in its communities through the club infrastructures that go right the way down, and I think that they will be shaken by this because players will be taken away from clubs and they'll play in these centralized competitions. The owners of competitions, I think it's recognized, and the players who play in the competitions are the people who benefit from such globalization and such monetization of elite sport right at the top, but you can't ignore the grassroots.
Let me just get your thoughts on the harm that you fear and the principle that many people we know and many more will be joining this camp, the principle that people feel is being violated. Because let me put this to you. Football is a multi-billion-pound business. The elite players are all, well, astronomically highly paid. They're millionaires in their own right. Individual football clubs are, well, the big ones are worth billions as a market asset. And this is simply, more of the same. What is the sacred principle that this threatens?
I think it's not necessarily more of the same because it takes away the linkages, as I was trying to say, right down through the global game that football is. It takes away those linkages that go right the way down to grassroots. And I think that's one of the difficulties. But, we saw several things in the World Cup that we didn't like. I think the intervention on Balogun and Infantino's part in that, have we heard any more about that? I don't know. But one starts to get this suspicion that the game, the pinnacle of the game that people aspire to is perhaps not quite where it should be in terms of true sporting ethic. And this is another step away from that because I don't think, I'm a chartered accountant, so I actually don't believe that when you have the stakeholders you're going to get in, they will want their payment, and that will show in many sides, such as at the top end of the game, there's already too many games for player welfare. And now we're going to have even more. We've seen part of this already in this tension between UEFA and FIFA with the World Club competition that came in. And you saw there the attempts by FIFA to step into that arena and make more cash and so forth and so on. So I actually think that this just takes it too far into commercialization and away from that sporting ethic.
Yeah, it is suggested that some of the football associations around the world could stand to pick up, I don't know, tens of millions of pounds as a consequence of that, and FIFA, through, as it were, the mouth of Gianni Infantino, they're emphasising that point. They're talking about democratisation of football. There will have to be debate, won't there, among the world's football associations, and you wonder how that's going to shake out. In fact, what the outcome of this is going to be. There will be a row. How will it end?
And that is the danger in this, because when Sepp Blatter was in play, I think they had more countries than there were in the United Nations, and each country had one vote. So the FA and the larger FAs had one vote. They had no more influence than some of the smaller FAs. And as a consequence, if you appeal to that part of your constituency, you can get quite a lot of things through. And there was a lot of cash came into FIFA at the time that Sepp Blatter was there because of the television monies and the media monies that were coming in. That was then percolated out into the very smaller FAs. And as a consequence, it was very difficult to get anything through that the exec didn't want to happen.
I mean, yeah.
And you might see this as a forerunner of actually, well, let's go for a 64 country World Cup, and this is just a stepping stone, and then you move on again into this area of globalization and monetization.
Yeah, I'm just trying to imagine what the World Cup final might look like if the whole thing is owned by a set of shareholders. And we've seen half an hour half-time breaks to get in entertainment, all good for the advertising. We had those hydration breaks in the middle of a half, so you can get more advertising time. I mean, what on earth next?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult for. I mean, I guess I would be a dinosaur, but I couldn't imagine playing a game and then having half an hour break and then going back out again. I mean, it must have affected the psyche of the players, and they will have thought it through, and they'll have kept them warm and so forth and so on. But at that very basic level, it starts to impact. But I think one of the, as I say, pulling the game away from its roots. Look at what happened with fans. They tried to move game times around. They moved fans up and down the country and around the place, and they had this dynamic pricing model for actual tickets itself. And they also they allowed a secondary market in the tickets as well. So you're seeing all the sort of the face of mammon here in terms of what's happening to a game that essentially is a very simple game, it used to be 90 minutes, and should be owned by players, fans, clubs, and if the countries want to stick their label on it, as they do, some take it to extremes like Argentina. But it's there to be used as that type of vehicle. It's not there to be used as a vehicle to make more money.
Okay, really, really interesting and powerful arguments. Mark Palios, thank you, the former FA Chief Executive.